Hello Senior Stage, it's Gail here. I'm with you today and we're going to have a look at formulas and how to use them. The first shape we're going to consider is a rectangle. You should all know that a rectangle is a four-sided figure where all the angles are 90 degrees. It's a very common shape. We use it a lot in rooms, windows, doors, books, a lot of things. A rectangle has two measurements. It has length and width. The length is usually represented with an L and the width with a W. Sometimes you'll see this formula written in slightly different ways. It could be length times breadth, which is L times B, or it could even be base times height, in which case that would be a B and that would be an H. It really doesn't matter. You've just got to know how it works and where you put the measurements. So over here we would get the area of a rectangle is equal to B times H, or A is equal to BH. Over here we would get area is equal to L times W, or A is equal to LW. Over here, area is equal to L times B, or A is equal to LB. In the example here, the length of Mike's classroom is 12.2 meters and the width is 10.7 meters. Calculate the area. The first thing that you should do is check the shape. This is a rectangle. Then you write down the measurements that you have. So I'm going to use length and width. The length, which is L, is equal to 12,2 meters, and make sure you include the units. The width, which is W, is equal to 10,7 meters. The second step is to choose the formula that you need. In this case, we're looking for area is equal to length times width. Now what we have to do is we have to substitute the measurements into the formula. L in the formula is going to be replaced by L over here, which is 12.2 meters. Now remember, substitute means 12.2 takes the place of L. You know, when soccer players are substituted, one goes off and the other comes on. Well, L is going to go off and 12.2 is going to come on. The same thing happens with W. We are going to substitute 10.7 for W. So W will go off and 10.7 will come on. That gives us area A is equal to 12.2 and 10.7. But we can't just write it like that. We know that when we've got the numbers, we've got to put the multiply sign back in. The answer to this is A, or area, is 130,54, and in your answer you must have the units. Area is meters squared. In this exercise we're going to round correct to the nearest whole number. So area is equal to, when you're rounding correct to the nearest whole number, you go to the first number after the decimal comma. If it's a 5 or more, you make that one bigger. If it's less than 5, you leave it the same. Over here we have 5, and so we are going to make that 131 meters squared. A parallelogram is like a rectangle that has been pushed over. It also has length, and then it has height. Because it's been pushed over, we've got to be very careful of how we measure the height. It must be the vertical height. The straight distance, that must be 90 degrees. The straight distance from the length to the opposite side. And that's logical. When you measure your height, you're standing up straight. We use the symbol L for length and the symbol H for height. Sometimes you will see parallelograms that have their heights drawn outside the parallelogram, where it meets the length that's been extended. It makes no difference. The two heights will be the same. The formula for area of a parallelogram is length times height. Or just using symbols, A is equal to LH. And you all know that LH means L times H. We're going to go through an example. A parallelogram has a length of 11 centimeters and an area of 44 centimeters. Calculate its height. Your first step is to write down the measurements that you have. So length, which is represented by L, is equal to 11 centimeters. And area, which is represented by A in the formula, is 44 centimeters squared. Then you write down the formula you're going to use. A is equal to LH. The next step is to substitute your measurements into the formula. We are going to substitute the 11 in the place of L and the 44 in the place of A. And here you have an equation. 11h is equal to 44. To get the h by itself, you divide by 11 on both sides. 11 goes into 11 once, so we have 1h. And 11 goes into 44 4 times, and we must remember to include the units. That's the same as saying the height is 4 centimeters. A trapezium is a rather odd-looking shape with a rather odd name. It has two parallel sides, and then the other two sides aren't parallel. The parallel sides also aren't equal. So we just label the sides. Usually the letters A and B are used to represent the measurement of the two parallel sides. Like a parallelogram, a trapezium has height, which is the perpendicular height between the parallel lines. Also, like the parallelogram, sometimes people draw this height outside of the figure, where it would be drawn like that. But these two heights are the same. The formula for area of a trapezium is area is equal to the height divided by 2 and multiplied by the sum of the two parallel sides. So let's just write that in a shortened algebraic formula. A is equal to h over 2a plus b. The trapezium shown in the diagram has an area of 45,24 centimeters squared. Calculate its height. The first step is to write down the measurements you have. You have the measurements of the two parallel sides, and you also have the measurement of the area. So one of the parallel sides will be A. We'll make that 6.2 centimeters. B will be 9.4 centimeters. And capital A for area is 45,24 centimeters squared. Your next step is to write down the formula that you must use, which will be area of the trapezium. So area is equal to h over 2a plus b. Now you come to the substitution bit. 6.2 is A. So 6.2 is going to substitute for A. B is 9.4, so we're going to substitute B with 9.4. Our area is 45,24, so we're going to substitute area with 45,24. Areas being substituted with 45,24 is equal to H we're trying to find, so it's H over 2. A is 6,2 and B is 9,4. Okay, we've got to get to that A. So the one thing that we can do is add the two numbers in our brackets. H over 2, 6.2 plus 9.4 is 15.6. And on the left-hand side, we still have our 45,24. We need to get to H. We need to solve for H. So we're going to get rid of the 15.6 first. And we do that by dividing both sides by 15.6. Those two will divide out. And I'm going to leave my right-hand side just as it is. So I have 45,24 divided by 15.6 is equal to H over 2. We're nearly there. We've just got this 2 in the denominator. And so how we get rid of that is we multiply each side by 2 over 1. Two times H divided by 2 will just give me H. And then on the left-hand side, I have 2 times by 45,24 divided by 1 times 15.6. And you feed that into your calculator and you get the answer. H is equal to 5.8 centimeters. Remember the units. And it's much better just to write it the other way around. H is equal to 5.8 centimeters, the way we say it. I think I forgot to mention to you that you can use calculators for this section of work. Triangles are usually the first shapes that you deal with after rectangles when you're doing formulas. A triangle also has two measurements. It has a base, and usually the base is the bottom side, and remember that you can turn your page around so that you have different sides at the bottom. So this is the base and that is the base. And then triangles also have height. The height's not always the same. This is an acute angle triangle, the first one, and so the height is inside the triangle. Just like the trapezium and the parallelogram, the height is a vertical measure. So I'm just going to put the H there for height. This is a right angle triangle. So the height is actually that perpendicular side of the triangle. In an obtuse angle triangle, we've got to do what we did with the trapezium and the parallelogram, is you've got to draw the height outside of that triangle. The formula for area of a triangle is a half multiplied by the base multiplied by the perpendicular height. Using symbols, capital A for area is 1/2 BH, 1/2 base times height. The area of the triangle in the diagram is 207 centimeters squared. Calculate the measurement of the base. Write down the measurements that you have. You have the height of the triangle, which is H, is equal to 18 centimeters. You have the area, capital A, is equal to 207 centimeters squared. Next step is to write down the formula that you're going to use, which is area of a triangle is equal to half base times height, half BH. Now work out the substitution. 18 is going to be substituted in the place of H. 207 is going to be substituted in the place of A, and that'll leave us with B to calculate. So A is 207 is equal to 1/2 B, and then H is 18. Whoops, that looks a bit of a mess, doesn't it? So we need to tidy this up. Often a quick way of doing it is to say 1/2 times 18. What's 1/2 of 18? 9. B is equal to 207. Now I need to get B on its own, so I must divide both sides by 9. B is equal to 23 centimeters, or the base of the triangle is equal to 23 centimeters. The circle has very specific terms for its various measurements. Every circle has a center, and the line from the center to the circle is called the radius, which is represented with an R. A line that cuts the circle in half, so it goes from one edge through the center to the other, cutting the circle exactly in half, is called a diameter. And then the measurement around the circle is called the circumference. And circumference is a fancy word for perimeter. It's the measurement around the outside. The formulas that we're going to use for circles are the area of a circle is equal to pi times by the radius squared. In symbols, A is equal to pi r squared. Pi is a number. Some of you, if you've got scientific calculators, if you press the pi button, equals, you'll see what pi is correct to about 8 decimal places. So it is actually a fixed number, and if you don't have a scientific calculator, you must use pi equal to 3,14. R is the radius, and you've got to multiply r by itself, r squared, and A is area. The other formula for circles that you need to know is that you can find the circumference by taking 2 multiplied by pi multiplied by the radius, or C is equal to 2 pi r. A circle has a diameter of 50 centimeters. Calculate its area. Step 1, write down the measurements. So the diameter D is 50 centimeters. And whoops, that's the only measurement we've got. So we're going to write down the formula. Area is equal to pi r squared. We are trying to find the area. We know that pi is equal to 3,14, and over here we need r, but we've been given the diameter. One thing we do know is that you can always find the radius from the diameter by halving the diameter. A radius goes from the center to the circumference of the circle, and a diameter goes from one edge of the circle to the other through the center. So 2 radii make up the diameter. Now you can do your substitution. A is what you want to find. Pi, we're going to put the numbers in place of pi, and then we need to multiply by the radius squared. And you can feed that into your calculator. The area of this circle is 1962,5. What are our units? Centimeters squared. This answer has to be rounded off to the nearest whole number. The number after the decimal comma is 5 or bigger, which means I must make the number on the left hand of the decimal comma 1 bigger. Area is equal to 1962,3 centimeters squared. Before you start the exercise, I thought I would just cover this distance, speed, and time formulas. The first one I'm going to give you is speed is equal to distance divided by time. Or using symbols, S is equal to D over T. This is an easy formula to remember if you just think of your real life. If you ask somebody how fast were you going, you're asking them what their speed was. And they tell you, I was going 60 kilometers per hour. That's 60 kilometers per means divide by hours, 1 hour. Kilometers measures distance, and hours measures time. So the way we talk tells us that speed is distance divided by time. Once you've got that one, it's easy enough to work the others out. Speed is equal to distance times time. Now I want to find out a formula for distance. So I don't want the t for time. I'm going to multiply by t on both sides, and the t's divide out. So I have distance is equal to speed times time, or d is equal to st. And then the last one, if you start again with speed is equal to distance times time, how do you find out what time is? Well, that time's being annoying. It's sitting in the denominator of the fraction. So we're going to multiply both sides by t. These two divide out, and what I'm left with on the left-hand side is speed times time is equal to distance, which we know. And now we want time, so we're going to divide by speed. And we get the formula time is equal to distance over speed. So here's a formula for speed. Here's a formula for distance. And here's a formula for time. You only need the first one, the speed formula, because it's possible to work out the other two from them. So we've gone through formulas for various shapes, not all the shapes, obviously. We looked at the rectangle, parallelogram, trapezium, triangle and the circle. We worked through a few examples, and hopefully you noted that every time you do an example, the method has a sequence. Number 1, you write down the measurements that you have, and you must remember to have your units there, so you've got the right units in your answer. Then you write down the formula you need to use. Then you substitute the measurements into the formula, and the fourth step is to do the calculation. 4 easy steps to work with formulas.